She left you when you had nothing, when your hands were trembling, your mind was breaking, and the world was silent to your screams. She didn't just walk away. She looked back once, just to make sure you were still on the ground. That moment, frozen in your memory, wasn't just heartbreak, it was rebirth. Not the poetic kind, but the dark, gritty transformation that forges something ruthless out of what once was soft. You never wanted revenge, until life taught you how cold silence can feel. This isn't about hurting her. This is about rising so far above the ashes, she'll choke on the smoke of everything she burned. You were forgotten. Now you will be unforgettable. Watch till the end. This isn't a story. This is a warning. Subscribe, like, and share if you're done being broken. There's a moment you'll never forget, when everything in you cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but silently. Quiet like the end of a song, quiet like an empty room after someone walks out and doesn't come back. That moment when she left, it didn't just hurt, it hollowed you out. It wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing who you were with her. The version of you that believed in love. The version of you that thought if you gave enough, you'd be enough. She didn't just walk away from a relationship. She walked away from your belief that you mattered. And when that kind of pain hits, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door. Suddenly, you don't recognize your own reflection. You question your worth in rooms you used to own. You stop speaking because what's the point of being heard when you've been so easily forgotten? But let me tell you something you probably don't want to hear. Yet, that moment, that deep, suffocating collapse, was not the end. It was the reset. Because nothing changes when you're still holding on to comfort. Nothing transforms when you're still being fed hope in pieces. That pain, that was life stripping away everything, soft and safe, and leaving you with the raw, aching truth. You were never meant to stay that small. You see, people talk about rock bottom like it's a grave. Like once you hit it, you're done. But what no one tells you, what they can't tell you, is that rock bottom is also solid ground. The first stable place after free fall. It doesn't look like healing. It doesn't feel like progress. But it's the beginning of everything real. Because the you that existed before, that version was built for someone else's approval. It was fragile, desperate, conditioned to believe that love was proof of worth. But the version that rises after the fall, the one being forged right now, that one isn't here to be chosen. That one chooses themselves. And no, it doesn't happen overnight. You'll scream into your pillow until your throat closes. You'll look at your phone and feel the pull to reach out. Just one more time. You'll have nights where you beg the universe to undo it all. But slowly, in the silence she left behind, you'll start to hear something else. Your own voice. At first, it'll tremble, but then it'll grow. Not loud, not angry, certain, because you'll realize you weren't buried under that heartbreak. You were planted in it, and from that place, from that darkness, something unrecognizable will grow. Something sharper, wiser, and far more dangerous than the version of you who once begged to be loved. This pain didn't end you. It revealed the blueprint. Now it's on you to build from it. Once you realize she didn't create that pain, she only mirrored it, you take your power back. Not all at once, not with confidence, but slowly, quietly. You stop asking why she left and start asking why you stayed. You stop wondering if you're lovable and start learning what love actually feels like. Not performance, not sacrifice, but safety. You stop reaching for someone to fix what you never gave yourself. Permission, it wasn't just what she did. It was how deep it reached. It was how easily she found the part of you that collapsed. She didn't invent that pain, she just touched it. And everything inside you shattered like it had been waiting for an excuse. That's the part no one wants to admit. We carry wounds we've learned to walk around. Wounds we've painted over with distraction, with noise, with other people. So when someone leaves, when they betray you, disrespect you, forget you, like you were never real, it feels like they broke you. But the truth? They just exposed where you were already bleeding. You weren't destroyed by what she did. You were confronted by everything you never healed. Think about that. The reason her betrayal cut so deep isn't because she was everything. It's because somewhere, long before her, you believed you were nothing. Some part of you already questioned your worth, already feared abandonment, already thought love had to be earned with pain. She didn't plant that fear. She found it. And when she left, it bloomed. So no, she's not innocent. But she's not the whole story either. Because if you don't pause here, if you keep pointing the finger outward, if you keep waiting for someone to come back and apologize for what they awakened in you, you'll stay trapped in cycles, where pain feels like proof and rejection feels like identity. This is where it gets uncomfortable. Because healing doesn't start with closure, it starts with responsibility. You have to look at those cracks, the ones she revealed, and ask where they really came from. Maybe it was the parent who made you feel invisible. Maybe it was the friend who only loved you when you were useful. Maybe it was the version of yourself that you kept hiding to survive. Whatever it is, it's yours now. Not to blame yourself, but to reclaim yourself. Because until you go back and tend to those fractures, you'll keep meeting people who break you in the same place. But here's the shift. To feel, and eventually, you stop needing her to come back because you've already returned to the places she left behind. And this time, you didn't abandon yourself. She didn't break you. She pointed to the break. Now it's on you to build something that doesn't fall in the same place again. You kept checking your phone, not for news, not for an emergency, just for something, anything from them, a message, a memory, proof that you were still on their mind, even after they walked away like none of it meant anything. You waited. And while you waited, you kept shrinking. You told yourself to be patient, to be understanding, to be better. Because maybe if you just held on a little longer, they'd remember who you were. They'd come back. They'd finally choose you. But here's the truth that's hardest to face. They already did. They did make a choice. And it wasn't you. They chose to stop calling. They chose silence over explanation. They chose distance over effort. And yet you kept waiting to be picked. Like this was still up for debate. That's the part that hurts the most. Not the leaving, but the realization that you were the only one still holding on. The only one still trying to make it mean something. You weren't in limbo. You were left. And instead of walking away, you stood still, frozen by the hope that maybe if you just loved harder, waited longer, proved your worth just a little more, they'd change their mind, but they didn't, and they won't, because you were never waiting for them to see you. You were waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself. Think about that. Every time you begged to be chosen, you made yourself smaller. Every time you stayed quiet just to keep the peace, you erased a part of yourself. And every time you made excuses for someone who already let go, you told yourself you weren't enough unless someone else said so. That's what needs to end. You have to stop treating their indecision like it defines your value. You have to stop confusing attention with love and silence with mystery. You know the truth. You've always known it. They left. And by staying loyal to their absence, you left yourself too. This isn't about revenge. This is about return. Not to them, but to you. To the person you were before you thought love was something you had to earn through suffering. Because the moment you stop waiting to be chosen is the moment you realize you were never unworthy. You were just pouring everything into someone who had already put down the glass. You've been abandoned long enough. Now it's your turn to walk away. Not out of bitterness, but because you finally understand the person who's meant for you won't need to be begged to stay. You keep telling yourself you miss them. You scroll through old photos, play the same songs, replay old conversations in your head, trying to relive something that's long gone. You whisper their name like it still belongs in your mouth. But the truth is, it's not them you're aching for. It's you. The version of you that came alive when they looked at you like you mattered. You miss who you were when they saw you, when their presence made you feel worthy, when their attention gave your loneliness a purpose, when being needed made you forget how hollow you'd felt before they came. You thought that was love. But love doesn't disappear when someone leaves. That feeling, that spark, that worth you think they took with them, it didn't come from them. It came from you. They just helped you see it for a moment. Now they're gone. And what's left isn't just heartbreak. It's identity loss. Because when they left, they didn't just take their voice, their touch, their presence. They took your mirror, the one you were using to define who you were. So now you sit in the quiet, mistaking absence for grief and craving for love. But you're not grieving them. You're grieving the self you only allowed to exist when they were around. This is where the truth cuts deepest. They didn't complete you. They distracted you from the parts of yourself you didn't know how to love on your own because you were strong when you were with them. But it wasn't their strength. It was yours, reflected. You laughed louder, dreamed bigger, felt more alive, because you were finally unlocked. But now that they're gone, you've locked the door again and thrown away the key like they were the only one who could open it. They weren't. They never were. That aliveness, that energy, that soft, beautiful, powerful version of you, that was always inside. But you only allowed it to come out under the safety of being seen. The real work now is learning to be that version of yourself without needing someone else to awaken it. To realize that the person you miss most isn't texting back because they were never supposed to stay. They were only supposed to reveal what you'd buried. You keep thinking the pain will go away if they come back. But the truth is, it'll only stop when you come back to yourself, to your voice, to your worth. They were never the destination. They were just the reminder. You are what you've been searching for. Everyone talks about healing like it's calm, like it's lighting a candle, journaling your thoughts, and forgiving the people who tore you in half, like it's soft music and morning walks and a smile that slowly returns. But sometimes, healing is violent, not to others, but inside you. It's the rage that hits you out of nowhere when you realize how long you let someone walk over your boundaries. It's the nights you scream into your pillow, not because you want revenge, but because you feel like something inside you is dying and being born at the same time. Healing isn't always beautiful. It's ugly, it's messy, and sometimes it's terrifying because when the mask of "I'm fine" finally breaks, everything underneath comes rushing out. The grief, the guilt, the questions, the memories, and most of all, the parts of you that you silenced just to keep someone else comfortable. You kept saying you were healing. You posted the quotes. You tried the routines. But deep down, a storm was brewing. Not because you were doing it wrong, but because this is what healing really feels like when you've been through something real. You don't go through hell and come out singing. You crawl. You claw. You lose pieces of yourself you thought would always be there. And then one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the reflection. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown who you were pretending to be. Sometimes healing means letting go of people you begged to stay. Sometimes it's walking away without a final conversation. Sometimes it's choosing silence over closure because you've learned that not everything deserves a response. And sometimes it means burning the blueprint. Everything you thought life was supposed to look like. Everything you built just to feel safe. You let it fall apart. Because you finally understand, peace doesn't come from pretending. It comes from truth. And the truth is, you were hurt. You were lied to. You were abandoned. And you still survived. But survival isn't the end. Now it's time to rebuild. Not for them. Not to prove anything. But because you're done carrying pain, like it's proof of your strength. Healing might not feel like peace right now. It might feel like rage. It might feel like nothing. It might feel like starting over for the 5th time when you swore you were done. But every time you choose not to go back, every time you stop answering what once destroyed you, you're healing. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to be real. You weren't always like this. You used to care. A lot. You used to give more than you had love without second guessing, believe in people even when they gave you every reason not to. But now, Now they say you've changed. Now they call you cold. They don't see the nights you stayed awake worrying about people who forgot you the second. Everyone talks about healing like it's calm, like it's lighting a candle, journaling your thoughts, and forgiving the people who tore you in half. Like it's soft music and morning walks and a smile that slowly returns. But sometimes healing is violent, not to others, but inside you. It's the rage that hits you out of nowhere when you realize how long you let someone walk over your boundaries. It's the nights you scream into your pillow, not because you want revenge, but because you feel like something inside you is dying and being born at the same time. Healing isn't always beautiful. It's ugly. It's messy. And sometimes it's terrifying, because when the mask of "I'm fine" finally breaks, everything underneath comes rushing out. The grief, the guilt, the questions, the memories, and most of all, the parts of you that you silenced just to keep someone else comfortable. You kept saying you were healing. You posted the quotes. You tried the routines. But deep down, a storm was brewing. Not because you were doing it wrong, but because this is what healing really feels like when you've been through something real. You don't go through hell and come out singing. You crawl. You claw. You lose pieces of yourself you thought would always be there. And then one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the reflection, not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown who you were pretending to be. Sometimes healing means letting go of people you begged to stay. Sometimes it's walking away without a final conversation. Sometimes it's choosing silence over closure because you've learned that not everything deserves a response. And sometimes it means burning the blueprint. Everything you thought life was supposed to look like. Everything you built just to feel safe. You let it fall apart. Because you finally understand, peace doesn't come from pretending. It comes from truth. And the truth is, you were hurt, you were lied to, you were abandoned, and you still survived. But survival isn't the end. Now it's time to rebuild. Not for them, not to prove anything, but because you're done carrying pain like it's proof of your strength. Healing might not feel like peace right now. It might feel like rage. It might feel like nothing. It might feel like starting over for the 5th time when you swore you were done. But every time you choose not to go back, every time you stop answering what once destroyed you, you're healing. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to be real. They were fine. They don't see the years you spent breaking yourself into smaller and smaller pieces just to be easier to love. They don't see how much it cost you to always be the one who forgave, who tried again, who stayed. You're not cold. You're tired. Tired of explaining your silence to people who never heard your screams. Tired of building homes in hearts that only knew how to lock the door behind you. Tired of choosing empathy in a world that saw it as weakness. You've been burned, again and again, by lovers who only loved your softness until it made them feel something real. By friends who disappeared the moment your world got heavy. By family who never asked if you were okay, only why. You weren't smiling, and after a while, the fire doesn't just scar your skin, it hardens you. Not because you want to be hard, but because softness stopped feeling safe. You didn't stop loving. You just stopped begging to be seen. You didn't stop caring. You just stopped offering it to people who saw your heart as convenience. You've learned not how to be heartless, but how to survive without constantly proving your worth. And now you protect your peace like a body pulled from the wreckage. Not because you hate the world, but because you finally understand that not everyone deserves your warmth. They call it cold because it no longer serves them, because your silence makes them uncomfortable, because your boundaries remind them of the version of you they took advantage. But this is what healing looks like. It's not just crying and letting go, it's choosing who gets access. It's knowing that love isn't measured by how much you tolerate. You're not cold, you're not broken, you're not bitter. You're reclaiming the parts of yourself that used to burn just to keep others warm. And if that makes them uncomfortable, let it, because you finally understand. Being warm to the wrong people is how you got lost in the first place. At first, it just feels empty. The silence, the space, the stillness after everyone leaves or fades or shows you they were never really with you to begin with. You wake up and there's no one checking in. You go to sleep and no one says goodnight. And in between, there's just you, and it hurts. Because the world told you connection is everything. That if you're alone, something must be wrong. That silence means failure. That loneliness is punishment. But what if they were wrong? What if this silence isn't abandonment, but invitation? What if this space is not hollow, but sacred? Because when the noise fades, when the distractions die down, and when the people who only came to take finally leave, you meet someone you've been running from your entire life. You meet you, no filters, no masks, no roles to play, just you, raw, unedited, and waiting. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because you thought the pain was in being alone. But the real pain is facing all the parts of yourself you tried to drown in other people. The fears, the shame, the dreams you buried just to belong. This loneliness, it's not punishment. It's a return. It's your soul dragging you back home after years of getting lost in other people's stories. After building your identity around what they needed. After giving so much of yourself, you forgot who you even were before they arrived. Now the world is quiet. And in that quiet, you can finally hear your own voice again. The one that says, I miss you. The one that says, we've got work to do. The one that says, it's time. Because healing isn't always loud. Growth isn't always in the spotlight. Sometimes the most important transformation happens in the dark, with no one watching, no applause, no validation. Just you, choosing yourself. Not because someone else failed you, but because you're done failing yourself. So, yes, loneliness can feel like death in the beginning, but stay long enough, and you'll realize it's rebirth. You're not being punished, you're being prepared for a life that finally feels like yours, for relationships that don't require you to shrink, for peace that doesn't depend on someone else staying. This is the sound of you coming back to yourself. And even if it's quiet, even if it's hard, it's the most honest sound you'll ever hear. You spent years trying to belong. You shrank your voice, you softened your power, you traded your truth for comfort and approval. And every time they smiled at your silence, you died a little more inside. You thought blending in would mean safety. That if you were likable, quiet, predictable, they'd keep you close, they'd understand you, they'd stay. But what no one tells you is, fitting in is a slow death when your soul was built to disrupt, to rise, to break things open. You were never meant to be just like them. And deep down you always knew it. That uneasy feeling in rooms that applauded surface-level smiles. That ache in your chest when people laughed at things you stayed silent about. That constant voice whispering, this isn't you. That was your truth trying to breathe, trying to live, but you ignored it. Because standing alone, that felt terrifying. And it is. It's cold out here, it's quiet, it's uncertain. But what if this loneliness, this exile, isn't rejection? What if it's realignment? What if your soul is pulling you away from the crowd not to punish you, but to return you to the place where your fire burns the brightest? You were built for deeper things, for questions that unsettle, for truths that sting, for paths that aren't on any map. And those kinds of lives don't happen in the middle of the crowd. They happen in the quiet, in the tension, in the in-between. When you're misunderstood, when you're doubted, when you're left behind. But it's here, alone, where you'll finally feel your strength, where you'll stop measuring your worth by how many people clap, where you'll stop asking for permission to be real. And the irony is, once you stop trying to fit in, you start to attract people who see you as you are, not as you performed, not as you pretended, but as you. You're not broken because you feel different. You're not lost because you walk alone. You're just ahead of the crowd, on a road that demands you choose between their comfort and your truth. And maybe that's the hardest part. Realizing the life meant for you will cost the version of you they accepted. But trust this. When you finally let go of fitting in, you step into a power that doesn't need approval to exist. You weren't made to belong to them. You were made to become fully, unapologetically you. You always thought healing would feel like victory, like proving them wrong, like showing up stronger, louder, more put together. You imagined that one perfect moment, walking into the room, head high, heart guarded, finally untouchable. But healing doesn't give you that moment, not the way you expected. Because healing doesn't shout, it whispers, and it doesn't come wrapped in applause. It comes in silence, the kind that feels unfamiliar and free. You were raised to believe closure comes from confrontation, from making them see what they did, from giving one last speech that would finally make them understand. But you don't need them to understand anymore. You need peace. And peace doesn't come from dragging someone to see your worth. It comes from finally seeing it yourself and walking away without asking them to follow. It's not dramatic. There's no final scene, no perfect words, just you realizing the war is over and that your healing was never about revenge. It was about release. Because there comes a day when your energy becomes too expensive to waste on what no longer builds you. And that day is quiet. There's no closure, no crowd, just a quiet shift in your soul that says, I'm done. Done explaining, done defending, done bleeding for people who never learned how to hold you gently. You walk away, not because you're bitter, not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop standing in places where your light is dimmed. And yes, it's hard. Because walking away with no explanation feels like surrender. But in truth, it's power, it's maturity, it's healing. You don't owe anyone the story of your pain. You don't owe anyone access to your recovery. You don't have to explain why you're choosing peace over chaos, solitude over noise, growth over drama. Healing isn't loud. It's walking past what broke you without flinching. It's no longer needing them to hurt the way they hurt you. It's finally understanding that not every wound needs a witness to heal. And if no one claps, if no one sees the strength it took to walk away, that's okay. You saw it, you lived it, you survived it. And now you rise, not to prove them wrong, but to finally live like they never had the power to define you in the first place. You thought revenge would be your answer, that it would fill the emptiness she left behind. You pictured the moment she'd realize what she lost, the moment your pain would become her punishment. But here's the truth, no one tells you. Revenge is a trap. It promises satisfaction, but only deepens the wound. It demands your energy, your time, your spirit, and leaves you empty, still chasing a feeling you can't catch. You want her to hurt like you did, to see your scars and feel regret gnawing at her bones. But while she may suffer, you suffer too, because revenge keeps you tied to her story, keeps your heart shackled to the past you're trying to escape. True power isn't in making her pay. It's in refusing to let her control your fate any longer. It's in silence, the kind that doesn't scream or shout but quietly rebuilds and rises. Silence isn't weakness. It's a fierce act of reclaiming your peace. It's saying, you don't get to define me anymore. It's turning your back not in anger, but in calm certainty. Because when you stop chasing her shadow, when you stop burning your light to stay warm in the dark, you become unstoppable. Revenge might haunt her, but your silence will haunt you forever if it's not chosen wisely. Choose silence that frees you. Choose silence that rebuilds you. Choose silence that reminds you you are more than the pain she left behind. And in that silence, you find your real revenge. Not the one that breaks her, but the one that makes you whole.